Okay, so let's start talking about grammars. And just a quick note, there's some reading in the book about grammar, so start reading chapter 2. Section 1 of chapter 2 is pretty short. Go ahead and look it over, but go through and work through their examples, so you can understand why they're getting the trees they do for that and so on. And I will say, and the book sort of mentions this, when I say grammar for this class, I'm going to be talking about context-free grammar. There are other types of grammars. There's a lot of interesting things to say and talk about, express the power of different grammars. Take the automata theory class. Yeah, lots of good stuff in there. We'll just talk about context-free grammars. That tends to cover the sweet spot of how most programming languages are expressed. It's a formalism that's powerful enough and yet not too powerful. Okay, so we're going to play the grammar game. And here's the grammar game. We're going to start with one string, and we're going to try to turn it into another string, and we only have a few rules we have to modify our string. So we want to turn the string S in cornflower blue here, into the string hot dog hit Android period. Okay? So what are the rules of the game? You can take as many steps as we like, but here, so let me go ahead and say I have S, and I want to end up with hot dog hit Android. And I'm going to make some steps. My steps, I'm going to go ahead and write with this thing here. So S turns into some other string, turns into some other string, turns into some other string. Will turn into this. So that's my goal. And I'm not going to put quotes around the strings in these productions here. So great. What are the rules? I have them listed on the bottom half of the screen here. Rules 1A, 1B, 2A through H, 3A through G. If you see an S in your string, you can replace that one letter with NV period. That's rule 1A. Rule 1B, if you see an S, you could instead, if you want to, choose to replace it with NVN. Okay? And now, you may have already guessed, SVN, I'm going to use sort of standard grammar terms for English grammar: subject, noun, verb. Okay? And I'm kind of thinking, this rule S as sentence, noun and verb. A sentence is either, according to our very simplified grammar here, a sentence is either a noun followed by a verb followed by a period, or a noun followed by a verb followed by a noun followed by a period. That's my intuition. The rules don't care about what I mean to say. The rules are just the rules. We can replace this string with that string. Okay, so I could replace it with NV period or NVN period. I'm just going to be clever and look at where I want to go. I want to end up with hot dog hit Android period. That sort of sounds like a noun and a verb and a noun. So I'm going to try replacing S with NVN. Okay. So great. Now I'm sitting right here, and I don't have any S's left. Okay. But I have other rules. I have rules. Number 2 is all the rules dealing with N. N can be replaced with a cat or UFO or apple or fox or dog or hot dog or Android or iTech. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this N here, the second N. I can choose any N. The rules say take any N, replace it with one of those things. I'm going to take the second N, and I'm going to replace it with Android. Okay, so NV Android dot. And if I really want to say this was rule number 2, what Android was, I guess if I called these rules A through H, was the second to last, that must be rule 2G. The rule that took S can be NVN. That was rule number 1B. The rules are not part of the official game. That's just me telling you, hey, why did I justify going from one string to another string? So I went from the string S to the string NVN to the string NV Android. How about that other N? Yeah, I want to go ahead and I want to end up with hot dog hit Android. So I want a string that starts with hot dog. If I can turn that N into hot dog, hey, I'm allowed to do that. Why? What rule number? Go see if you can figure out yourself. Go down to the rules here. I have rules 1A, 2A through H. N can be replaced with cat. No, UFO. A, B, C, D, E, F. 2F. Okay, so I now have the string hotdog v Android. Hey, rule 3, wherever I see a V, I can replace it with one of, okay, so, and sure enough, hit is one of the options. So hotdog, in fact, I can do this. Rule number 3, and hit was, if I want to be consistent, 3A, B, C, D. Okay. So I'm telling you how I went from S to the string hotdog hit Android according to the rules. That's all there is. This is syntax, not semantics. What does it mean that hotdog hit Android, period? Not my problem. That's semantics. Right now we're just on syntax. Syntax is a way to say, hey, what are valid sentences? Now this is a syntax for a pretty dumb, lame version of English, caveman English or something. I'm sorry, cave person English. We can have other sets of rules for other languages. In particular, Java has a whole bunch of set of rules for what is a valid Java file. Okay, a valid Java program. A valid Java identifier has its set of rules. A valid Java. So here we just had S and N, V, S, N, and V. For Java, you might have program, you might have statement, you might have expression. Within statement, there might be types of statements. There might be if statements, while statements, assignment statements, declarations. Gosh, a whole bunch of different things going on. So a lot more of these things. These things that are capital letters, that I'm using capital letters for, I'm going to call non-terminals, okay? And they were in light, this cornflower blue here in my notes. Non-terminals because really the strings that I want to end up with are going to be not going to have them. It's going to be a terminal string, and the things inside that string are only going to be terminals. So I'm going to get rid of all my non-terminals informally. So more technically, non-terminals, anything that's on the left-hand side of one of these rules that can be replaced with something else. If you can replace it with something else, it's a non-terminal. Okay. Okay. So this is the, if I ask you to play the grammar game, turn S into that string here, according to these rules, that's how you go about doing it. Okay. So you can go ahead and give it a try. I have another example here. Go ahead and just see if you can write down these systems. I'll be happy if you just sort of sketch it out here. You don't have to like formally write it down, but sketch out, see how many steps it's going to take and what rules you're going to use to turn S into Foxbyte. Foxbyte period, technically. Okay, so if you stopped and paused and did that, I think the interesting thing is, look, we won't use rule 1b, we'll use rule 1a. S goes to NV, so I'll go from S to NV. Then I can choose to replace either the N or the V. There's no rule about what, out of all the things you could replace, which one you have to replace next. Choose any of those. So you might have taken the N and turned that into Fox by rule 2D or something like that. And then we have a Foxbyte period. We have NV period. We've turned that into Fox V period, and then turn V into byte by rule 3A. So it probably took about 3 steps. By the way, spaces, in my presentation, I'm going to play fast and loose with spaces. I'm just going to, spaces are not going to be, well, whatever. I'm going to sort of gloss over the whole issue of when is a space part of my string or not. I'm just going to sort of say it's hotdog hit Android period. Okay. When we go ahead and play the game, you're going to use this symbol here. This symbol here means the string before me goes to the string here in a single, according to one rule. Okay, so that's what this arrow sign means, equal sign greater than. The first string goes to the second string according to one rule of the game. So really this is, I'm chaining it all together here, sort of like what I did in my algebra classes. I had some, x squared minus, or x cubed minus 3x squared plus 2x blah, blah, blah. And I said that was equal to something else. And then I had equal something else, equal something else, equal something else. And each of those steps was a single, I might even written my justification off on the side. Hey, I'm using the I'm doing a factoring out an x here. I'm using the distributive rule. I'm using the quadratic formula for this step or something. Okay. Let's go ahead. So the interesting part about the grammar game is not so much I have a grammar, now let me try to make a string out of it. I mean, that's interesting in this way. More interesting is, hey, I have some idea in my mind of the sort of strings that I want to allow. Let me come up with a grammar for it. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this grammar we have and let's make it a little bit more sophisticated and make our English sentences a little bit less crude here. Okay. Oops. So I want to go ahead and allow articles, a, and the. And I remember from my third grade class, articles come right before a noun. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say that, hey, right before a noun, we must have one of these articles always. Okay. That'll be my rule. Now, if you say, hey, I want to also allow sentences that don't have any article or nouns without any article in front of them, well, you can think about how to write a different grammar to do that. But okay, so I'm going to come up with a grammar where all nouns are preceded by an article. Gosh, how should I do that? What are my rules? So I currently have these rules here. I'm going to need to update these rules here. Here's the one. S can be replaced with NV. I'm going to change the N. I'm going to leave N as being something that can turn into an individual noun without an article. So I want to go ahead and I need something else to talk about what is a noun that has an article with it. And I'll call that a noun phrase. That's pretty lame. Noun phrases in linguistics are much more intricate than just that, but yeah, okay. So here's my new rules, 1A and 1B. Okay, you can S replace with NP. Now I need to have some rule about what can NP be replaced with. Okay, so now I have rule, I'll call this rule 4. 4A, NP can be replaced with art N. Art for article. And I think I'll get by. This will be just rule 4. But now I've introduced a new non-terminal art. I better have a rule about that. 5A to C. If you have the string art in your program in all caps, you can replace it with A and the. Okay. So now this is a little bit more sophisticated. Go ahead and come up with the hot dog hit an Android. So this is a very slightly better grammar. Better as subjective here, but okay. Maybe I should rewrite this so my rules 4 and 5 are down at the end. That sort of seems reasonable. Goal, turn S into, what did I say? The hot dog hit an Android. Period. Okay, so I need to change things. I changed my rules a little bit. 1B is different. It's going to be NP to NP. So, NP, I can go ahead. Before I had N that I turned it to Android, I want to go ahead and I want to get NP to turn into an Android. How am I going to do that? Can I go ahead and write this? NP becomes an Android. Common misconception. People say, oh yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. What rule are you using? Go ahead and answer that to yourself. Pause for a second. Tell me out of 1 through 5, what rule says you can replace an NP with an Android? Trick question. It's not one rule. We did 2 steps at once. And we're not allowed to do that. We could have to take 1 step at a time. The rule was NP can be replaced with art N. So that's what I really needed to do. I needed to replace this with art N. Okay. And that was rule number 4. Okay. Then I can replace, I'll do it this way, and besides I can take whatever I want. I'm going to replace art with and. What was that? That was rule 5b. Second option with it. Okay, then I can go ahead and turn this into the N into an N into Android, and that's rule 2G again. I didn't change that rule there. So the N can go into Android. Okay, and so on. So I'll just go ahead and finish this out now at full speed. Editing, copying and pasting from my old one. So let me go ahead and replace the first NP. You know, to be a little bit more consistent, even though I'm allowed to take any of the non-terminals in there, or I can apply any of these 5 rules, here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to ask you to do this on the homework. I'm going to call it a leftmost derivation. Take the very first non-terminal. So out of NP, you know, up on this, if you had something that looked like this, I'd say, hey, take the very first thing, NP, and work on replacing that before you work on replacing turning N into Android. So I've gone so far in a non-standard order. From now on, I'm going to do everything sort of left to right. It makes it a heck of a lot easier to grade. So please go ahead and do this on your homeworks. Okay, NP can replace. There's only one choice. It has to be art N. Okay, and that's rule 4. Art. I have this left to right rule now. I better replace art according to that sort of convention. Art, I want to end up with a hot dog, blah, blah, blah. So it's, hey, I'm going to turn art into A, and that's going to be rule 5A, appropriately enough. A, N, V, and Android. Okay, so let's take the leftmost one, N. Okay, and now we turned that. That was the rule that we had before a hot dog, V, and Android. And what rule let me replace N with hot dog? That was rule number 2F or something like that. Okay, and then last step, replace V with hit. And that's the same last rule we had in our previous one. That was rule 3D. Okay, maybe make this easier. Okay, so this is now a derivation. We successfully, we won the game. Woohoo! We turned S into the hot dog, hit, and Android. So, oh, I goofed up. I'd asked for the, and I actually did this. Gosh, I backtrack and fix. So it really should be this. That was rule 5C. I got confused about the string I was trying to go for. Rule 2F is what let me change N into something. I can't change anything else. Notice that once you have a non-terminal in your language, like hot dog, you can't undo it. There's no rule that says, hey, you can turn hot dog into something else. Look at those 5 rules. Nowhere does it say a hot dog can be replaced with something else. So that's why those are terminals. Once they get in there, they're there forever. What happened? Okay. Here's a question. Is it possible? Now, there's some strings I can't generate from this. I think it's impossible to generate from S, according to these rules. It's impossible to come up with a sentence, hot dog, hit Android. Or the hot dog, hit an Android. Try applying those rules. You'll never be able to say the hot dog. You'll never be able to mention 2 nouns in a row. There's no way you can apply those rules and get that. Okay, so our grammar does sort of say some things, some sentences, strings can be created from this grammar, some can't. That's pretty good. Again, this is syntax, not semantics. Could you go, what do these things mean? We don't care. Could you say, the hot dog hit a Android? Sure, you could have done that when we went from replaced, it was back here where we introduced and. I could have just used rule 5A. I was allowed to do that. I could have said NPVAN, and that A would have carried all along, and I would have ended up with the hot dog hit a Android. Is that bad grammar? Well, my grammar allowed it, so it's legal according to this grammar. Maybe that's not the grammar you want to try to capture, but okay. So that's using grammars in a very sort of an intuitive way and being able to come up with strings. It's the grammar game. Turn one string into another string. Usually our initial string is some sort of standard start symbol, like S for a sentence. You'll always start with S in my examples. No real reason. I could give you any one string and say, hey, can you get from this one string to that one string by playing the game? In practice, I'll always start with S. I'll always end with some sentence that's always non-terminals. That will always be my goal. Okay, let's go ahead and digest that, and then we'll come back. We'll see some other English examples, and we'll see some more intricate rules as well. And actually, the next thing we're going to do, well, let me finish with that. I know I always think of these things last moment. These rules are a little bit hard to read. You have to really... Let's go ahead and get a better syntax for the rules for the grammar game. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Copy, paste this, move this down here. A better way of writing the rules. Okay, to say that S can be replaced with NP V dot. I'll say this, S arrow NP V dot. Okay, and this is defining. This is a definition of Rule 1A. Okay, so I might just sort of say, like, I guess I can do it here. Again, naming these rules is something that you won't see in the book. Something that I've thrown in to help you follow what I'm doing. I find it really helps to, when students are making 2 and 3 and 4 steps at once, I think it helps to force the student to come back and say, hey, tell me what rule you use to get from that string to that string. And when they can't find a single rule that does it, then they realize, oh, I was skipping steps. So it helps you catch that error, since you'll lose points on the homework if I ask you to start with one string, derive another string, and you skip steps. If nothing else, remember this symbol. It's a technical. This is not a, hey, this thing magically turns into that. The symbol of double equal sign greater than, or the rules that I had down here. I thought I had better symbols for that. Okay. Let me go grab some. Here we are. Copy. Pull that up here. So really I should be using that symbol. Oops. I can edit. Okay. Yeah, so this double arrow is a technical meaning. It says this string goes to that string in a single step. The string derives this second string in a single step according to a single rule. Okay. So, by the way, this single arrow is a different symbol, and that's part of a rule. It's like, hey, I'm defining a rule here. I'm not, it's like writing a program versus running a program. What we just did up above was running a program, if you want to think of it that way. Here we're going to be writing the rules of the program, writing the program. And you can use a single arrow there. So 1A is that rule, 1B was this rule. Okay, and for the two A through H, I'll still list it as A to H. N, capital N, goes to, and here's what I'll say, cat or UFO or apple or, so this this vertical bar is really a shortcut for the or. Say, hey, here's rule 2A, here's rule 2B, here's rule 2C, here's rule 2D, and so on. Okay, so if you're okay with that, this is how I'll go ahead and specify the grammar. Each of these rules here, each of these is called a rule. And I'll always write it in a very specific way. The rule will have a single non-terminal on the left, like S or N or NP. And then the right will be a whole big string that might have terminals, might have non-terminals, might have a little bit of each. What is dot in this? Is dot a terminal or a non-terminal? Yeah, dot is a non-terminal. Sorry, a terminal. It's terminal, it ends there. There's no rule saying, hey, if you see a dot, you can replace it with something else. So therefore, it is terminal. Once it gets in there, it's going to be stuck there. Okay. Okay, and so on, so we get all this here. Okay, so the numbering of the rules, I'm just doing that to help you and me, listing my reasons when I'm doing a derivation, having one string derive another. That's just informal to help me. You won't see either of those parts in the book. I recommend them. But being able to have one string derive another, be able to come up and say, hey, I know what I have in mind about, say, adding articles to nouns. How can I write a grammar that captures that? By the way, how would you make a grammar that captured something like and has to occur if the noun starts with a vowel sound? Gosh, that's going to be, trying to get that into a grammar, things suddenly become much more complicated. We have to start specifying vowels and individual nouns, and nouns that start with vowels and nouns that don't start with vowels are going to be different non-terminals. Let's just gloss over that and have a grammar that's not as good as we like. Let's just say a Android, but good enough for our purposes. Fortunately, in programming languages, if you have a nice simple language, hopefully you can come up with a nice simple grammar. Yeah. Okay. We'll come back with some more complicated rules, and in particular some recursive rules, and see what that can buy us.